On today's INI9, we are going to walk around the streets of Singapore, and I have with me my colleague Harsh Gupta. And he's going to talk about things like fiscal federalism. So, Harsh, what's this fiscal federalism thing?
Fiscal federalism is something which is trying to make as many decisions as you can at the state level instead of the central level. That is,
Well, what kind of decisions are these?
for example, fiscal federalism, of course, specifically refers to fiscal decisions, economic decisions, what kind of welfare programs you want to have. You want to design them at the state capital and not necessarily in Delhi. There are, of course, many reasons for that. There is more political accountability at states. If Bengal does not like a certain idea of how education is being done, it can try to vote out the West Bengal chief minister.
Yeah, but isn't this the way coalitions, I mean, the argument against this is that coalition allies are just holding up reform because of you citing fiscal federalism, right?
No, some kind of reforms were held up. For example, urban rent control was held up until the urban lands, the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission was passed, which incentivized some kind of economic reforms. But that is more the exception than the norm. Generally, a lot of reforms have already been done in delivery, in supply side factors, which are then superseded by Delhi. A classic case is the right to food.
But okay, go on.
In the right to food, for example, states like Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, they all had their own different ways of using, let's say, SMSs or some other incentives to actually have enough quantities of food and rice, whatever the number was politically decided. Similarly, in education, we had a lot of experimentation happening until we had the right to education and even the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan passed. What is often confused in centralization was the centralizing of finances. People confuse the good part of these reforms.
So what's the good part?
The good part is money from Delhi.
Okay.
But people forget that the money from Delhi is also ultimately going from the local city to the state capital to the Delhi, to the Delhi town. And that is how then it gets percolated downwards. And of course, there's a cut at every layer. To take a simple example, NREGA. In NREGA, we try to have a uniform wage for the state of Bihar and the state of Punjab. Now, of course, what is below market wages in Punjab is probably and is actually above market wages in Bihar. So that led to a sudden coming back of many Bihari workers, or at least stopping of new Bihari migration to other parts of India. Now, that may or may not be good for other factors, but this is clearly a distortion which was built into the NREGA scheme, which distorted the local Bihari market much more than the local Punjabi.
Yeah, but then does it mean that, one argument which people make is that, look, the states just don't have the capacity to make these kind of policies, right? So if you leave it to them, they'll just probably, squander off the whole opportunity.
See, there are two things here. States don't have the fiscal capacity is one argument, and states don't have the administrative or technocratic or technical capacity.
Or both.
Or both. And both are because most of the money from the states goes to the Delhi. So they can't hire top-notch civil servants or external consultants, and they don't have enough money. One way to do this is to keep more of the tax revenue at the state level and less at the central level. The other point here is not simply the distribution of money between Delhi and states, but also competition between states.
Okay, but how might this play out, let's say, in the current political sense, right? Everybody is interested in politics.
Right.
What does it mean?
See,
because
this is another
does it make coalitions any easier to govern? Does it mean some parties will have an advantage over others?
Of course, the ruling party at the center will have less patronage to dispense.
Yeah.
If you have less centralization.
Right.
For example, you can always pass some kind of laws or reforms or some kind of special packages of welfare policies which will favor a state which is being ruled by a party. I mean, the extreme form of this is having flood money going to maybe your states ruled by the Congress right now instead of, say, Orissa, which has happened. The broader point here is not that. The broader point here is simply, the distribution of money gets decided by political factors, because although the Finance Commission, I think we are on the 13th Finance Commission right now, the Finance Commission tries to use a scientific formula to divvy up money, but then there is always this discretionary additional amounts which get distributed. For example, Mamata Banerjee from West Bengal has gotten 8,000 crores and 4,000 crores from Pranab Mukherjee. And this is clearly not through the Finance Commission. This is simply
over the top.
This is over the top, right?
Over the top,
instead of over the table political bribes for retaining her support.
Right.
Whereas the other factor is not simply how politically money gets divided, but you end competition between states. It is true that if you suddenly give all these programs back to the states, they might not be ready to take them at one go.
Right.
But it is also true that by having uniform programs throughout India, you're preventing competition and new ideas.
Yeah, the whole idea, how can you have a one-size-fits-all?
Yeah, the laboratories of democracy, states being the laboratories of democracy, one size fits all.
Yeah.
Many of the good ideas, for example, started off, let's say for free lunches in government schools. They started off in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, and we've opposed them at that time. I remember opposing them when that happened.
Yeah, I mean, you could oppose it for normative reasons about whether education should consist of lunches or not, or for fiscal reasons. But the idea eventually caught on.
Yeah.
The idea is now we are actually foreclosing future experimentation by states by having a uniform RTE, by having a uniform right to food, by having a uniform right to work law, NREGA.
Right.
NREGA, for example, if you talk to a lot of the local rural officials, they all insist that we can't create durable infrastructure because of a certain ratio limit on using capital machines as opposed to labor.
Right. And
now they're trying to tweak the law. Now they're trying to tweak the law by saying, okay, maybe you could use machines in this case, or maybe you could combine other rural works with NREGA. Now all this goes from the state capital in the form of a letter to the rural ministry in Delhi. Then there is a national advisory council on it, and everybody has their say on it. And before anything happens, it's too late, and probably there are new problems cropping up.
Right.
So I think the clear-cut solution here is you need to allow states to experiment. But experimentation also involves failing.
Right.
And the only way failing would be penalized and experimenting would be rewarded if it was a good experiment is if you allow states to attract companies, smart individuals and consumers with different tax rates.
But would you say that fiscal federalism will create the incentives for states to do this? Because if you look at it, I don't think Bengal, Mamata Banerjee is trying to attract good people or good companies or anything. If anything, they're going to push them apart.
And that actually proves the point because Mamata Banerjee knows that she can get discretionary funds from Delhi. And that is why the moment she became the chief minister, she actually regularized what was called para-teachers under Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. That is, she made them part of a union, she gave them pensions and benefits. She had absolutely no political incentive. She had a lot of fiscal reasons, but she had no political incentive to actually retrench or control the growth of the state bureaucracy. She did not want to take any tough decisions, and because of the existing political economy in the country, which is centralized, she could get away with it.
Okay.
For example, let us take an analogy. In the US, where, again speaking of education, a lot of people in the center-left coalition or Democrats oppose teacher unions.
Right.
Support teacher unions because they're a good money contributors to the party, Democratic Party, to their coalition. But when the economic recession hit, because DC, the state, the capital of the US, could not bail out individual states, many of the Democrats are forced to adopt school choice reforms, retrench some unionized teachers, get more charter schools, private school vouchers, which was simply unimaginable even 2 years by Republicans.
Okay. Now let's we are going to close this, right? So now if you have to put this in a nutshell, 30 seconds, how would you put it?
See, the simple idea is if 30 states represented by 30 people go to a restaurant and they said the bill would be divided. Everybody is likely to order the most expensive wine and the most expensive food. At the same time, if they say more or less you'll pay for what you eat, along with some communal sharing, then you're much more likely to spend your money carefully, which would be good for the entire fiscal situation of the entire country. So it's all about sharing the costs, diffuses the accountability instead of increasing the accountability.
Okay, on that note, I think let's go to a restaurant and share the bill.
Yes, let's have a coffee.
Okay, let's have a coffee.